Spain have been crowned as the 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup champions after defeating England 1-0 in the final. So let's talk about it. Well, the much anticipated Women's World Cup has come to an end. It feels like it's been going on for an eternity, but it also feels like it just started last week. Regardless, we've got our winners, Spain, the champions, the reigning world champions now, we should refer to them as. Qualified for their first Women's World Cup in 2015. That's only 3 editions ago. This World Cup, they made it into their first ever semifinals in a major competition and went all the way to win the biggest and most luxurious trophy in women's sports, in women's football, the World Cup. The gold medal at the Women's World Cup on the biggest stage, and they certainly did it against some very tough opposition. Sarina Wiegman, one of the best head coaches in football, unfortunately was not able to solve this riddle. She solved plenty of riddles and plenty of puzzles, but this one just seemed a little bit too tough. England, unfortunately, were not good on the day. They were beaten on areas that they needed to be much better, and Spain took advantage of that, full advantage. I'll be diving into everything that happened in the game, the substitutions, the plays, where Spain was able to win their game and where England fell short. We'll also be talking about the tournament as a whole, what this means to the women's game, as well as touch on the context of the whole Spanish team and the situation that we've found ourselves to be after their victory. As expected, Spain dominated the ball. They pressed England high in the first half. They forced the Lionesses to go a little bit more direct, and after kind of a fairly open start where both sides were super close to their own opener, Lauren Hemp at the start, she hit the bar for England, came really close, and Spain's dominance began to tell slowly but surely. Spain came in with a few changes from the last game. They've been switching up their starting 11s pretty consistently, with every other position kind of having a player in and out throughout the games. England came in unchanged from their last game, and there was a big topic around, is it going to be Ella Toone or is it going to be Lauren James to start? Lauren James was back from her 2-game suspension after receiving a red card against Nigeria. We all do know what happened, and we'll not be talking about the red card today, but she was back, she was available, and Sarina Wiegman chose to go with Ella Toone over Lauren James, who came on later on as a substitute. Spain took the lead in the 29th minute through captain Olga Carmona's shot. It was a beautiful finish. They caught England lacking and leaving some spaces behind. We'll be able to break that down a little bit later in the video. At 23 years old, the captain is the second youngest starting captain for a FIFA Women's World Cup final. She got the winner in a final. She got the winner in the semi-final. I mean, at 23 years old, not many people at 23 can dream of things she's doing right now. Winners in the semi-final and the final to get her country their first ever World Cup title. I mean, that is something only Carmona can say she's done that. Other than that, conceding that goal, and it was a very tough goal to really concede looking at the technique that Carmona struck it with. Mary Earps had a fantastic game. She saved a Jenny Hermoso penalty and had some very crucial saves that really kept England into the game and kind of gave them hope over and over again that there was a chance to equalize. Unfortunately, the equalizer did not come, and Mary Earps was actually awarded as the goalkeeper of the tournament award. Now that's all wrapped up, let's take a deeper dive into everything that did happen and how it led to these events that I just described. And we're going to start off with Sarina Wiegman's tactical gamble, you could say. When previewing the final in my earlier episode with Rich Laverty, we had a very big discussion on, is it Ella Toone and is it Lauren James? And actually, Rich said that he thinks Ella Toone is going to start. And not surprisingly, Ella Toone did start, because Rich is spot on with a lot of things that he says. Ella Toone has been relatively quiet throughout the tournament. That's nothing to hide. She did step it up last game in the semifinals, scored her own goal, was available when she needed to be, and was the player that we knew Ella Toone could be. And it was going to be a discussion of, do you start it based on form or do you start her based on the opposition? Now, I think she was started based on opposition, but also the fact that she was in form and kind of has gained momentum starting the consistent minutes that she did as Lauren James was out. This time, unfortunately, she had another quiet game, and her trademark, and I think why Wiegman went with her again, is that she presses relentlessly and bursts into the box late. She's always that late runner that you need her to be, and she's also that number 10 that you want her to create in the middle as Lauren Hemp and Russo are making those runs. But when England are not dominant in possession and when England don't enjoy the majority of possession, she kind of takes a little bit more of a quiet or a peripheral play in attack. And in a game like this, Spain do dominate possession, and so you kind of did expect to see Toone be a little bit more quiet than not. She came very close to putting one in the back of the net. She was offside, but overall it wasn't that she was putting massive threats or pressing how she usually presses or how we know Ella Toone can press when they dominate possession up high. But there was even times where she should have made those runs and opened up spaces for her teammates, and she didn't. If you look closely at the Lucy Bronze dispossession that led to the Spain goal, Lucy Bronze was driving inside, and this is a run that we've seen her do often. I don't know if we've seen her overcommit this much into the middle, but it did look like she ran out of options. And if you're really if you're watching on YouTube, if those listening on Spotify or Apple, you won't be able to see this, but if you're able to look at exactly where Lucy Bronze was dispossessed, and I'll leave a picture right here, Ella Toon is all over on the side, and you can tell that flank has so much energy. It looked like Lucy Bronze was looking for an option, and you can actually see the frustration after this play and after she was dispossessed by Aitana Bonmati. She carried the ball, and there was nobody else to lay it off to, and there's nobody making a run or offering an option to get that ball into them. So she just committed a lot of space that we know was exploited, and playing the formation that they were playing of a 3-5-2, that's always a risk. And it just looked like on that play was a lot of what we saw in a lot of England's plays. They were just not on the same page. Spain, on the other hand, showed that they were on the same play more often than not. And we'll talk a little bit about Spain, but that is something that England... It's funny that they got dispossessed from that play because that play was also quite telling to what happened during this game, that England was just not on the same page. The players were not on the same page as we know they can be. And it's, this is not to blame Lucy Bronze or not to blame Ella Toon, because had Ella Toon made that run and Lucy Bronze laid it off to her, things could have played out a little bit differently, and that's just the game of football. Going into that second half, it looked like Sarina Wiegman needed to make some changes. They were losing a lot of the battles in the middle. They were inviting a lot of unnecessary one-on-one duels on the side. On the flanks, that 3-5-2 formation is a formation that they've enjoyed, and they made that switch during the tournament, but it was one that it has a lot of obvious flaws, and teams can work against those flaws, but it looked like England was just not able to stabilize those flaws. In other words, it wasn't just that one moment that led to the goal. Even I think it was about 10 minutes before, around the 22nd minute, you could see Rachel Daly pressing very high, Alex Greenwood being dragged out wide, which is kind of how it works. You drag your fullbacks, you extend your back line, but that can expose a lot of spaces if not dealt with correctly, of the fullbacks commit a little bit too much. There's plenty of spaces there, and I think Spain's starting 11 was perfect in exploiting those spaces, which is why Salma Paralelo was put on the flank and was a starter, not as a sub later on. Given how aggressive and direct Spain's own fullbacks were, it looked like the fullback battle was Spain's to win, and it also looked like Spain won those midfield battles. So going to that 45, Sarina Wiegman needed to change shape, and she probably needed to change personnels to allow that shape. Lauren James comes on for Lacia Russo, and Rachel Daly comes off for Chloe Kelly. I was not expecting those two personnels, and I don't think if there was the right two personnels to make this change allowed them to slip into that 4-2-3-1 that they like to play, or more of a 4-3-3 depending of their on possession or off possession. So how that ended up looking like with Ella Toon is Lauren James was on the left and Ella Toon was in the middle. Now, I'm not sure if taking out both your strikers, specifically Rachel Daly, who we know can be that late runner, specifically playing as a fullback, were the right two people to take off when you needed to score a goal. I think Sarina Wiegman is a manager that's been forced to do a lot of tactical changes this World Cup more than the last 3 major competitions that she's had to. Last year in the Euros, she had a starting 11 that she didn't change. This wasn't the first time she's done it, because she's done it before in the Dutch. She, again, is always quite resistant to change, or has been, but I think we saw at this World Cup she was very good to changing, and when she did make those substitutions, they were good, and when she needed to make those changes of shape, they were there. So I think as a whole, Sarina Wiegman got a lot of the puzzle right during this tournament, but I don't think she got it where it mattered, which is in the final. And it's easy to criticize afterwards. I'm sure she can rationalize it, and she actually did, which is great. So let's talk about how she rationalized it. In the post-match press conference, Sarina Wiegman explained that those changes intended for England to press a little bit higher, but unfortunately Spain were always able to beat that press and get out of that press. Spain's fullbacks committed. England was not able to counter that and press that, and it invited a lot of 1v1 positions in defense, which is, again, a lot of the things that we saw in the first half. Again, according to Sarina, that when they had the ball, they just were not able to move it quick enough. They were not able to push quick enough, and they wanted to challenge them with speed. They couldn't do that. In the second half, they did play much better. I think Lauren Hamp was able to use her speed centrally. They were able to utilize a little bit more of that flank work, get a little bit more aggressive, and move that ball a little bit faster. Was it fast enough? Unfortunately not. this squad for the World Cup was quite different than the one in the Euros, because 3 of those starters that were not changed, Beth Mead, Frank Kirby, and Leah Williamson, were not in. You also had the likes of Ellen White retire, and you had Jill Scott retire, so there was different personalities, and you had those youngsters actually slipping into the starting 11. Ella Toon and Alessia Russo were the impact up, but this time they were the starting 11s. You had Lauren James being added to the bench, you had the likes of Jordan Nobbs. It was different personnel that you're working with, and I think England has a very, very bright future. You look at those players, I mean, in the goalkeeper department, it's a bunch of 20-year-olds. In the back, they still have got the likes of Maya Letitia, who wasn't even included in the 23 squad. That midfield of Kira Walsh, Ella Toon, and Georgia Stanway, they're all under 24. Like, it's a bunch of stars. And even the front line, Alessia Russo, Chloe Kelly, and Lauren Hemp, like, those players are going to be the face and the prominent players of a World Cup for years to come. It is massive that they're able to get this experience this early on in their first major World Cup, and the fact that they've gone to the final and they beat the opposition they had along the way, despite the many challenges and despite the hurdles that they had to face, is massive. It's huge. And I think what we saw England and the whole country react after the Euros, I think it will be very similar this time around. Sure, they didn't win it, but they come back home with a big statement, a silver medal around their neck. That's massive. That's also going to get conversations going. Lotte Wubben-Moy is one of my favorite players in terms of the voice and what she does for the game on and off the pitch. And I think she will also have a very important role for what's to come afterwards. So England definitely leave a little bit upset, a little bit disappointed, but I think there's plenty to be proud of and plenty to play for. Again, there's the Nation Leagues coming up. There's the Olympics. Obviously, I know that's a different setup for the English squad, but hey, World Cup's coming up probably 4 years after this. The Euros is after this, and like I mentioned, they've got plenty of brilliant young stars that this is probably only the start of a lot of the England greatness that the men's game has tried to portray throughout these years on the international stage. For Spain, I mean, Olga Carmona, you have to talk about her impact. She's only scored 3 goals for Spain, and 2 of those have come on the biggest stage. Like I mentioned, the semi-final winner and now the final winner. We can sit here and talk about Aitana Bonmati for days. I mean, I can have so many episodes about her play, her mentality, the way she changes midfields. But my God, she's just so good. And in this final, it was a very interesting topic that even Rich and I talked about of Aitana Bonmati and Kira Walsh. We know those two balled it up at Barcelona together. This time they went up against each other. And my God, was Aitana Bonmati the one who won those battles. I think Kira Walsh is one of the best midfielders in the game. But when it came between those two, I think Aitana Bonmati edged her, and it could just be the night. On another day, the result could be otherwise. It's probably a very tight and equal match between those two, but for today, it was Aitana Bonmati that won it. Available when you need her to be, super good with beating England's press. She's really good in finding options and switching the play. My God, was Spain so good in switching the play. She's pacey. She was winning those running battles, so good and quick with her feet that it would cause England a little bit of chaos, a little bit of panic, and she was just the complete midfielder that you would want her to be. I don't think she was given enough praise during this entire competition, and in my few episodes that I talked about the different games that went on, I made sure to give Aitana Bonmati so much praise because her impact is honestly superb. Teresa Abelera, another superb dark horse. For me, she was the most consistent out of that Spanish squad. I think Mariana Caldente as well, so good going to the left, going to the right, wherever she was deployed, because she was put in different positions in a few games. But whatever duty she was given, she would do it flawlessly. And it's funny, all those players that I just mentioned are kind of what led to that goal. You had Abelera pressing, you had Aitana Bonmati dispossess Lucy Bronze, Caldente with the assist, and Carmona with the finish. I mean, like, you've got your brilliant players combining together on a play. It's not a surprise it's those players getting all together on that final winner. Carmona Caldente was a link-up play that I was very, very happy and entertained to watch. As a left back, as a full back, Carmona was like all over the place, and Caldente was always there to combine with her, and even that showed, or that link-up play specifically showed to be a little bit too much for England at times. Really, Spain were really calm in beating that English press, specifically kind of like testing the waters a little bit in that first half, seeing where the players are pressing, who's pressing who, and kind of just seeing, almost assessing the situation. And once that was figured out in the opening 10 minutes, it looked like Spain was really calm and comfortable in breaking that England press, which is not something that many teams can do at that ease. the Onabatie Rachel Daly battle was a really fun one to watch. But for Spain, they broke the press. They dominated possession, which a lot of times doesn't really matter because Spain always dominate possession. That's kind of what they do. You expect them to do that. But they dominated possession in the right area. They dominated possession in England's half. They dominated possession on that left flank more than the right flank. Again, is kind of where they know their threats are and where England's weaknesses are. Another topic that I spoke to Rich about in my preview was Spain's game management. We've seen them in big tournaments kind of go up but actually lose momentum. Or again, if you look at the quarterfinal of last year's Euros, which is not really a game we should be comparing because it's different occasion, different squads, different position in the tournament. But Spain went up last Euros against England, but they were defeated, and that's how they've lost a lot of their games and how they've been knocked. The first big real test to that, or the whole idea of game management for Spain, was against the Dutch when they were caught, I mean, literally like dreaming, and the Dutch were able to equalize. And it was, right, can Spain put a comeback on? Can Spain make sure they had a lead? They just lost that lead, but can Spain make sure that they're able to get that success again of putting in the ball at the back of the net? And they did just that. They had the same test against Sweden where they got their own goal. A few minutes later, they equalized. That test happened once again against Sweden. Salma Parallel got her own goal. A few minutes later, Sweden equalized. But literally within 49 seconds, Carmona got that win. So the quarterfinals and the semifinals presented a lot of tests for Spain that they've previously failed. And it looked like, okay, shall they go down or shall somehow they lose a lead in a final? We've seen them be tested. Another flair of play that Spain hasn't had in previous years is their direct play. Specifically, some of these goals that we saw where it results from direct play, or even Carmona's winner against Sweden. That is nothing, or that's not a pattern that Spain's ever attempted. That's a lot of the patterns that we've seen at club level. Like from Real Madrid, they do a lot of that pattern. A lot of the shots that came in that final game were things you see at Barcelona. So it looked like the players were using their own individual kind of knowledge that they do at club level to bring that into the international squad. And I don't know if that's something they discussed beforehand or that's been something that they've been allowed to pitch into the game plan. But we saw Spain mix up their routines a little bit. It wasn't just sticking with those fancy plays and tiki-takas, which they did. That's how they play. No other team can do that. No other team can pass the ball the way Spain can. No other team can beat a press the way Spain can. Other teams beat presses, but just not in the way Spain does it. It's different, and this entire success and this success that we're seeing right now has to do with their youth setup. I mean, they have just completed a Women's World Cup sweep. Only Japan has ever done that before. So the U17 and the U20s won their own World Cup last year. Now the senior squad won theirs. That is your 3 World Cups completely claimed by Spain. I mean, Spain is literally the reigning Women's World Cup champion in any category you want to put it as. It is a complete sweep. Again, that's not something you see in football, really, not in the men's game or the women's game. This is the second time it's ever happened. But this victory and this trophy comes down to Spain's continued success at youth level. They have got some of the best academies around the world, and sure, there's still space and room to improve for those club academies, but there's no other youth setup that functions the way the Spanish one functions and pumps out talent the way it does. We can look into England's academy setup. We can also look into how the US has their own youth setup. It's all different, but Spain has shown to be the best in the past decade. So it's no coincidence you're seeing an under 20 win a final with the under 20 and come and do some massive damage for the senior squad. That's exactly what you want your youth system to do. Now, there's obviously a lot of context around this Spain win in spite of their federation leading up to the World Cup, and I've done about 20 videos on this. I'll leave plenty of links and articles and resources that I suggest you do read to really understand what Spain is currently dealing with, why their federation is handling things the way they are, and the players' position and the players that are not included, which, by the way, I need to make some massive props to the players, the likes of Matt Billion, Guijaro Patri, And before I even start talking about that whole context thing, I want to give some massive props. And I think a lot of my thoughts are with the players of like Mappillon, Jara Patri. I mean, there's a few players that are out on protest demanding for better, that they have not returned to the international squad. And should they have returned to the international squad, they could have had a golden medal around their neck. I mean, you're talking about the likes of Mappillon, one of the most decorated and one of the best defenders in the current game right now. She's got Champions League titles. I mean, she is a Ballon d'Or nominee. Like, you think elite defender, you think Mappillon, but she's not come back and she's not supported in an environment she feels is not good enough, and she is demanding better. That is something that you have to just stand behind and clap for the players that are protesting for what they believe is right. And we've seen players do that. Unfortunately, this is a trend that still goes on. Ada Hegerberg missed the 2019 World Cup because she was out protesting. The US Women's National Team has had their own fights during World Cups. And, you know, this is a topic for a separate video about just the World Cup and federations fight. But for Spain here, it's really hard to not sit back and think about what this means for Spanish football, what this means for women's football at all. Vilda is an individual who has lacked success with the women's national team, and this is the first trophy he's had with this talented squad. Again, we just talked about that pipeline that Spain has had, and he's never got them past the quarterfinals in 7 years until today, until this tournament. If this was any other coach, he would have been gone years ago. But there's clear backing and there's clear support from the federation regardless of what he does. If that means he is failing to win a quarterfinals, it doesn't matter because he's got that backing, and we've seen that happen. If 15 of the best players in the entire game are saying we need better and we deserve better, and the communication that we're getting from this manager is not it, and you're still supporting him and keeping him, there's a clear fault regardless of what the current situation is. There is something in that RFEF, in the Spanish Federation, that backs up Vilda regardless of the situation. We know that players have returned back, they stepped down from protest, and it's been really hard to understand what the current situation is. Vilda should not be a manager that's supported. We know players have talked about discomfort around him. He's had some pretty ludicrous rules. Back in the 2019 World Cup, he would ask the athletes to keep their hotel rooms open until he would come in and check everything's okay. It's like, are we in boot camp? Like, certain rules and certain things that players clearly were not happy about. And Vilda is not a person we should be praising and kind of giving all that credit for. It's a lot of individual brilliance and it's a lot of praise for those players. But in a general sense, it's really hard to comment and speak about the situation because the players have obviously come out and said, we are having a great time, and the federation has given us everything we need to do to win. I don't expect a player at a press conference after winning a World Cup is going to say anything otherwise. And sure, they can use a platform, but I don't think a press conference an hour or two after winning a World Cup is the one to start smacking on your federation. I mean, you still need to get paid from the World Cup, right? Maybe once that cash is in your bank account, they'll be saying something. You've got Spanish sources saying that the federation has added physiotherapists, they've added nutritionists, they've refined that staff, and they've made a lot of improvements for this World Cup, which is why a lot of players have returned. Okay, great. But you've also got other sources saying there's still plenty of friction between the staff and the players. But then you've also got all these things that are happening on the broadcast of players celebrating away from Vilda and the staff. Like, it's a very messy situation, and it's really hard to comment on it when the players haven't had their full truth to speak about it. Absolutely, I want to know that the federation has made their changes, and absolutely I want to know that they've refined staffing. Like, that's exactly what we ask federations to do. But is that really hitting every single concern? Because if so, and if that was the full truth, then you'd have the likes of Mappillon be back in. You've had the likes of Patrick Guijoro be back in. Those are not players that are willing to miss the World Cup. Maybe it was not good enough for them to return. I don't think we'll be able to get the full truth just now. I just hope that the federation can learn a few things to give the players what they deserve, and for the players to protest because they have the biggest platform right now. We saw the US Women's National Team take their federation to court. I mean, they drew them into a battle to get that equal pay agreement. And if Spain can put up a battle with their federation or protest whatever they demand, now is the time to do it. They've got literally the biggest platform as the Women's World Cup winners, and I think a lot of the women's football community will be backing them up regardless of what it is that they demand. This has been such a massive World Cup. I will have plenty of content breaking down what we do after the World Cup. There'll be a lot of player reviews and player profiles. Leagues kick off very soon. It's crazy. It feels like it's football after football after football. There's a lot of conversations, a lot of topics. I want to hear your opinions on the entire tournament. For me, this has been absolutely brilliant. I've gotten the chance to speak to so many people, write for so many different bylines. It really has been fantastic. Share a lot of conversations with you. It has been fantastic across. I've enjoyed it. I will need probably a few weeks to sleep and catch up on a lot of my sleep, but let me know your thoughts, and as always, to stay updated and to continue enjoying the beautiful game, make sure you subscribe to me here on YouTube and follow me on Twitter, and I will see you later.